What skills do you think have been important to your success?
I think that probably the main one is curiosity. Um, I'm curious about lots and lots of things, and I follow up on some of them that are even outside of my field. But I think being curious is certainly something that's always guided me to the next step, which is examination, research studies, creativity, and innovation. And then the third thing is energy. Um, Many people have lots and lots of good ideas, but it takes time and it takes energy to follow through on those ideas. And so I think that those three things taken together really are the things that allowed me to do the work that I've done over the years.
And as we know that you become internationally involved in gifted education in different countries, and most of your books, most of your research studies and models are already introduced in other cultures and in different languages.
Well, I think that there are two reasons for that. And one was that early on, as my work grew in popularity, I was invited by Professor Franz Monks to come and lecture in Europe, which I did during a sabbatical year. An interesting footnote to that is that three Dutch economists just did a follow-up study, a 25-year follow-up study of a school that I started in Holland with remarkable results for all of the kinds of successful characteristics of the students that were in that school. So certainly Dr. Monks was influential. The second person that was influential was you.
Thank you.
Your worldview, and especially the work that you've done in Europe and the Middle East, was influential in your arrangements that you made for me to speak in Europe, in the Middle East, and other places. And so I think that that's how work gets spread around. Somebody locally has to see the value of work that was done in America or any other country for that matter as benefiting children in different parts of the world.
Thank you, Joe. What about talent development with underachievers or underachieving and at-risk children and youth, based on the important work you did in this area?
Well, I think that this is really very important because the talent pool of the world probably includes 10 times as many underachieving, minority, underrepresented students as what we typically think as, let's call it, our college-going population. And these people are oftentimes overlooked because they don't score well on traditional tests, but many of them have outstanding characteristics in creativity, in motivation, in task commitment, what people today are calling grit. I've referred to it early on as task commitment. And we need the human capital from the entire population of the world to continue to make the world a better place. There's lots of challenges that we face in the world today, in politics, in industry, in business, in environment, in peacefulness and social relations between peoples and countries. And it's going to take lots and lots of human creativity and ideas and talent to address those problems. We can't overlook people because they happen to be from a poor background or speak languages that are different from the minority language. We have to look into those populations for our talent reservoir.
As a creative scholar, where do your best ideas come from?
My best ideas come from watching something in practice that is very exciting, that seems to be having a positive effect, and that might be the basis for a research study to find out if either that's the magic of the one teacher I saw doing it, or can we replicate that in other teachers? In science, people usually think theory leads to research, leads to practice, and I believe that's backwards. I believe that practice leads to research, and if it works out well, then it can be blended into the theory. In my work, theories always come last, and what has come in the middle is researching whether or not a practice is replicable and what other things that I didn't even know might be there are the result of that research.
And how could we achieve excellence in gifted education in particular and any educational system in general?
Well, I think that the way to achieve excellence is to, first of all, realize that schools are places for talent development. Yes, there is basic material, vocabulary, and mathematics and functions and equations that are important for young people. But if we look at a school the way a conservatory looks at a young musician coming in, or a place that trains chefs looks at them as persons that they are going to make into world-class Michelin-related chefs, and follow their pedagogy a little bit more than just the pedagogy where we present material, children memorize it, they get ready, they take a test, and we move on to the next topic. And I believe that our work in school-wide enrichment model and the enrichment triad model has said something like this: information itself has no value. Thinking skills themselves have no value until we put them together to use them on some project, research project, some theater production, some musical composition, some fiction or nonfiction writing. All of those things suddenly have value when we see that there is a purpose. And that's why when children say school is boring and they say it's irrelevant, it's because we haven't given them enough opportunities to put their knowledge and their thinking skills to work into something that is meaningful to them.
Yes, and I remember, Joe, in 1990s when you were introducing curriculum compacting, differentiation, all types of differentiation. It was the first attempts at the international level, because at the very beginning of the 21st century we were talking about productive thinking and thinking skills, but you were talking about this nearly in the 1990s.
Yeah, it takes a long time
Yes.
for an idea to take hold, and
Yes.
I think that I'm so happy that our work, although it has its roots in gifted education, is now being adapted and adopted in many places in general education. I think the gifted field should be proud of the fact that we've had a major influence in making schools better places for all young people, not just children that have been formally identified as gifted.
We have different approaches when we talk about programs for the gifted. For example, some people asking me, Joe Renzulli always talking about serving the gifted in the regular classroom or in the regular school. And then I say, okay, there is another trend that we have special schools for the gifted. Then they are asking, about advantages and disadvantages between, when we make comparison between these two approaches.
Well, I believe in what we sometimes refer to in our work as a continuum of services. And that continuum ranges from providing different kinds of enrichment and acceleration activities. Acceleration in our model we do individually through curriculum compacting, but that we provide those in regular classrooms. But if we have a group of students that have a very strong interest in, let's say, doing an environmental study about pollution in a local stream, or the need to recycle garbage or waste products, then that becomes a focus group. In our model, we call those enrichment clusters. And so all of those kids are coming together because of the commonality of the interest and the commitment to do something about that interest. So we go from the general classroom to a smaller focus group. And then we have some children who are extremely advanced in a particular area, and they might go into something like a specialized high school, like Bronx High School of Science, or they might go into an advanced class in science at their own high school, as long, in my opinion, it has opportunities for creative productivity, not just learning AP Science to take a test.
Yes.
So a continuum of services means various types, from what happens in a regular classroom to what happens at a conservatory for musicians, or a science, a special high school for science, or a special high school for arts and theater, and everything in between. And I do think that at the elementary and middle school levels, that we should be doing things in the regular classroom and in enrichment clusters. In high schools, we should have some special opportunities, the seminars that are based on our enrichment cluster pedagogy, so that young people are together using the kind of pedagogy that I've talked about, in an investigative, a creative investigative type of pedagogy.
You are always careful about, the resources which might be available for teachers. And I do remember at the beginning of the year 2000, you were encouraging people to produce, materials for the teachers to be ready, and then you were up to date, and then you invested and employed technology in a good way. And then you come up with a unique system. We call it Renzulli Learning System. So will you please give us a brief idea about what the system all about, what are the main functions and features of this system?
The Renzulli Learning System was something that Sally Reese and I developed out of necessity. And when I say out of necessity, we realize that the kind of pedagogy that we are advocating, recognizing students' strengths and interests, and providing them with lots of resources to promote those strengths and interests, couldn't be done without the effective use of technology. And so we developed a system where we create a profile for each individual child that looks at their academic strengths, their interests. Interests are so important to anybody doing anything important.
Yes.
Their learning styles and their preferred modes of expression. And that's all done electronically, and it produces a profile which is then read by a search engine that scans each individual child's profile, and it finds resources just for that young person based on their individual profile. So it's really unique. No one else has yet come up with anything like that. I think that its greatest value may also be in allowing teachers to search any given topic that they're studying and find high engagement resources. All of our resources are very hands-on. Children can build their own roller coaster or dissect and preserve their own mummy. They can do all kinds of interesting things virtually from these online resources that we've gathered from around the world. And now that system is also being made available in all of the languages of the world. Originally, it was only available in English, and now we're adapting it through artificial intelligence so that it can be translated virtually into any language. And I think that you can't do the kind of teaching that personalizes learning, especially with advanced level resources, unless you have quick and easy access to, I think there's 50,000 resources in the databases of Renzulli Learning. And that's going to pick resources just for a given child, or if a teacher wants to infuse some enrichment into her or his classroom, it will find those resources. And most of them come from places like museums, libraries of Congress, professional organizations, and most of them are free.
Do you have any advice for young researchers?
Besides learning all of the kinds of skills that allow them to do the most sophisticated research possible, I think that they should always approach a research project with this question: will it have influence on the consumer of our work? And the consumers to me are always teachers and young people in classrooms, whether they're in primary classrooms or college level classrooms. That there's a lot of research that's done these days that is just basically number counting, and we find out how many children in different groups get free and reduced lunch, and what the average salary is for teachers, and how many hours per week children spend or don't spend in a gifted program. And that research can't hurt anybody. It's just that it doesn't help a teacher who's trying to make his or her classroom a happier place. Enjoyment always comes first, a more engaging place, and a place where children view learning as the exciting process that it is. Again, what I call the 3 E's. I think that whenever someone approaches me about ideas for research, I give them that advice, that the end consumer has to be the person that can benefit it from, not just the fact that we can put a bunch of numbers on a table and say we did a research project.
Yeah, very true. What do you think will be the next breakthrough or hot area in gifted education?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things that are going to be hot areas, and one is that we can translate our interest in reaching more underrepresented and minority groups and children who just think differently, that we can get better at doing that through various kinds of assessment tools and techniques. And we all believe that that's a major goal. And I would say right now, the largest issue facing the field of gifted education. And I do think that the next step has to be the practical part of that. All right, what can we do to make sure that a child who may even have a learning disability, but is one of the most creative kids that ever walked through the door of the school, how can we find that child and serve that child well? That's the direction that I think some of our research should take. The other thing is the use of artificial intelligence is now just in its very early stages. One of our colleagues, in fact, has developed a creativity test based on artificial intelligence, which is the first test of its kind that can be scored electronically. The biggest problem with creativity tests has been that they need to be scored by humans, because you can't make a choice A, B, C, D, or all of the above.
Yes.
And so the work of this person is going to be a giant step forward, because now creativity will be more objectively measured in an economic fashion than it has been in the past. And I'm happy to say that we're going to be blending that creativity test into the Renzulli Learning system, which will make it, again, a one of a kind in the world.
And this will extend also the profile.
Yes, the profile will be extended greatly.
Yes. At the end of this interview, I would like you to conclude this interview by some recommendations, suggestions to the participants of this conference and the people in general.
Well, I think that conferences are great places to become exposed to different people, different ideas, and different approaches to serving gifted education, to serving general education. I think that one has to look at those things in relationship to how can it benefit their work, whether they're a teacher, whether they're an administrator, they work in a ministry of education. How can this make a change? The second thing I recommend is that they have to examine, let's call it, the validity of that work. When someone comes up to me and says, I have a new model for gifted education, and I look at the model and I certainly pay attention to the model, but what I finally ask them is, are there 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 schools that I can go to and see this model in action.
Yes.
And I believe that we can always make one perfect laboratory setting about that model, but everything is concentrated. Is it replicable? And that's why I don't want to see just one school. I want to see 3 or 4 or a half a dozen schools that are using the model. The quote that I mentioned earlier, example is the best school of mankind, and they will learn it no other. I think I have to see it in action, and then I can say, wow, that's really doing some great things for kids, and I am happy to recommend that. But the first thing I would recommend is for people to go and visit it. You have to see it in action. And that's one of the reasons with our school-wide enrichment model, somebody can call me from any state in the United States or a number of places around the world, and I can give them the name of somebody's school that they can go to and visit and see it in action. After that, they can learn the how-to. How can we do this in our own school? And one of the things that I'm proudest about in our school-wide enrichment model is that we have common goals, the 3 E's that I mentioned earlier, but I want people to use their own imagination and curiosity and initiative to shape and mold the program in their own way, because if you don't have ownership, it will not last.
Yes.
As long as you reach the 3 E's at the end of the line, and that's the way I will get new ideas. I will then recommend those ideas. Here's something that they did at a school in Chile that I think is a great idea that other people can benefit from. Or here's something that happened in a school in Jordan or in Dubai or in Germany or in France that can be shared with other people. And that's one of the things that we do at Contritude, by the way. We have people coming from all over the world to share their successful ideas. And we all benefit from it.